right, hello out there. This is Tommy Valentine, the Executive Director of Historic Athens. I want to welcome you to afternoon's agenda of this moment in history, COVID-19 in Athens, Georgia. This is the 22nd episode we've completed. If you're interested in going back and looking at the previous 21 episodes with community leaders, political figures, business owners, please feel free to visit our video section of our Facebook page for those previous interviews. Also, so you know, today's interview is not just something for you to watch. It's also something that you participate in. If you have any questions for our guest today, or you'd like to chime in the comments, you can do such by commenting below this video while it is still live. If so, we'll be able to bring your comment, question, and feedback on screen. Maybe it's a word of encouragement. We'll be able to bring it on screen, share with our guests, and share with the audience. That's particularly important when you consider that there are really two audiences for today's program. The first is you, the person that's likely watching this in real time here in 2020. But the other audience is future generations. We are planning on compiling all 55 interviews as a digital archive, and then contributing that to local research institutions, libraries, and such, so that future generations, 50, 60, maybe 100 years from now, can look back at this moment in Athens history and get a sense of what it was like to live through this experience. So by contributing a question today, you'll not only be helping move the conversation forward, but you'll also be contributing to the historic record with your thoughts and feedback. So I hope that you'll do that. As I mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of Historic Athens. About halfway through the program, we'll let you know what that means, what Historic Athens is, and how you can get more involved if you're someone who appreciates Athens, Georgia, and loves local history. But for now, what we want to do is get right to the program. So that means introducing you to Kent. Kent Kilpatrick is someone who's been in our community for a long time. And so many of you will already be a familiar face. When we bring you on, or when we bring him on air, we'll give him a chance to introduce himself to you as well, and his current role with the ACC Leisure Services. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Kent on air. You're just with me 1 second. Okay. All right. Kent, hello, how are you? Oh, bear with me 1 second. Bear with me 1 second, Kent.
Your sound is...
All right, okay. Kent, hello. I think that I've been able to do some of this. All right, great. So sometimes when these interviews are beginning, if this is your first time tuning in, sometimes the audio as Facebook opens or closes the vent for us, it can be a little spotty, but it tends to get better as the program continues. So stick with us. So Kent, hello, welcome to the program. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. Thank you for having me, Tommy.
Okay, very good. And Ken, just so you know, it seems like we might be experiencing a little bit of a lant, but that's nothing that the nightly news doesn't have to deal with on an evening basis. So we'll try to be as professional as they are. So Kent, as I mentioned, your work and you as a figure, you may be someone that's familiar to our audience, but there are likely people tuning in who have not met you before and don't know about your work in this community. So could you take a few minutes and introduce yourself and talk about what you do here in Athens, Georgia?
I'll be glad to. Thank you. I'm currently have the good fortune of being director of the Leisure Services Department, which oversees all of our local parks. But beyond our parks, we also have a nature center. We have a historic theater in Morton Theater. We operate the zoo at Memorial Park, the Greenway and Firefly trails, which are still developing, and some new sections coming on very soon. So we have a broad range of cultural and natural resource areas, as well as your traditional athletic parks. Amazing staff that I'm fortunate to be part of, that help make this happen in our local community. I've been with the Athens Clarke County government for 33 years now. Started actually with the Clarke County Parks Department in '87, and then was here through the unification of the two governments, and been in management of leisure services ever since. So I have that good fortune of having one of those jobs that on a daily basis, if my schedule permits, I get to be outdoors. I get to go to a fabulous arts center in this community, get to go perhaps see what's happening on stage at Morton Theater or check on the animals at the zoo. It's really a blessing to be part of this community and in this role.
Well, yeah, it's given how many things your department does, I can imagine it being a very exciting role. Also, I see here that I appreciate the comments I'm seeing from our viewers. It seems like audio and video is cleared up now, so I'm glad to know that we've weathered that storm. Also, Jeremy Field just chimed in to say that I think we saw Kent the week before everything shut down at the NSAT Center. Can't wait to take the kids back there soon. So, I'll admit my ignorance as much as I think I know this community pretty well. I don't know what the NSAT Center is. What's that, Kent?
It was the original name for the new Nature Center building out at Sandy Creek. We now call it the Vistra Center.
Yeah.
But it was an acronym for when that building first opened up in '98. So a lot of people that have been familiar with it still know it by that name.
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating. You and I have talked about this before, but I feel like I was, half raised by the Leisure Services Department. I went to summer camp religiously every year there at Sandy Creek and Nature Center. Actually, this year I had the pleasure of for Valentine's Day, we did. I took my wife and I to. They had a romance under the stars thing in the
planetarium.
And actually in the planetarium. That's right. Thank you. And actually, someone proposed in broadcast on the screen, and the staff had set up this whole surprise. And I think about how that's a perfect way to think about leisure services in a way, because I've been in that space to bring my 2-year-old for programming last year, Babies and Beasties. I've been there as an adult. I've stopped in there to use the restroom if I'm out on a run or a hike. There's the planetarium. And yet that is only one building of many, 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 many buildings and many facilities that you manage, each of which have stories to tell like that. So does it ever get daunting to be overseeing so many facilities that are each serving so many functions?
No, it actually doesn't. And I'll tell you why. The staff at Sandy Creek Nature Center, much like it is throughout the department, is really dedicated to what they do. It would be daunting, Tommy, if I didn't have such incredible people that were committed to their work. But they do such a fabulous job, as you just described, in helping the couple that wanted to be engaged in the planetarium and to propose. They go out of their way to make each adventure as special as they can for people. So it makes my job so easy. We just got wonderful people who are really committed to what they do.
Kent, one thing I know that that you've mentioned before when you're talking about this department with this incredible staff is I think sometimes you get the question why it's not called Parks and Recreation, because now that's a term that people increasingly are familiar with. There was a whole television show called Parks and Recreation, but leisure services suggests a step beyond just Parks and Recreation. Can you tell us what the difference there might be?
Well, we truly debated that name back in 1996 when we formed the department. But we knew that even then we offered so much more than what your traditional Parks and Recreation may offer. We've been one of the leaders in this state for years in offering a rich, culturally diverse programming. Your traditional Parks and Rec program does not always have an art center the magnitude of Linden House Art Center. They do not have a historic museum like the Linden House has. They do not have a dedicated dance facility. We hosted our fellow professionals from around the state at East Athens Educational Dance Center last year, and they were blown away that this community committed that much money to building a dance facility for kids in this community. And then to have a place like historic vaudeville theater like Morton is downtown. Yeah. You don't find that in your traditional Parks and Recreation. On the flip side, we also do a lot of science and environmental education programming. To have a nature center like we do, but also to manage our own zoo, to have over 2,500 acres of public lands that we manage. And we were one of the first Greenway systems in the state of Georgia. So we knew that we were a little bit beyond your normal parks and recreation facility, even back in '96. So we wanted to find a name that was a little bit more diverse and all encompassing, and that's how we settled on leisure services.
Kent, I think about why you don't feel nervous with or overwhelmed with as many managerial responsibilities as you have, and you emphasize the role of your team and what it's like to have a strong team. But I think that when I think about all of the different facilities from Lay Park to the Sandy Creek Nature Center to Southeast Clark Park, it must take a lot of really strong management. And it's tricky to manage that many strong managers, each of whom probably feel a real sense of personal ownership over the facility they manage. Just as a leader, as a manager, how do you approach managing that many strong managers?
Well, we do have a wonderful leadership team. We have an assistant director, and then we're divided into three divisions. We have a nature division, an arts, and a recreation division. And each one of them are very passionate about what they do. My job is to make sure they have the resources to be successful, and then to get out of the way and let them show what they can do for this community and to support them in doing it. And obviously, I've got to create a mission and a direction for us to all be following so that we're staying in step. But it's amazing what they are able to do and the skills that they've been able to show, not just prior to this pandemic, but since this pandemic has hit, it has amazed me, and I think many other people in this community, what this staff has continued to accomplish during these difficult times. So again, it gets back to that commitment, that drive that they each have, and it carries below that management team, and it becomes contagious to the supervisors and the level of programmers all the way throughout our staff. You'll see that same reaction from each one.
Yeah. Ken, as you were talking, I noticed that we just got a spike of folks coming in to view this video. If you are viewing, just so you know, you can certainly participate in today's discussion by commenting below the video. If you comment below with a question or a comment, we can bring it on screen and share it with Kent. Kent, one question. A little later in the program, I'm going to ask you a question about historic places. That's something that we ask everyone. But I wanted to, you mentioned the Morton Theater. And so I kind of wanted to get ahead of myself for a second by asking about your relationship to history, because, well, certainly I can imagine that this isn't true for every leisure service department in the country. Your role involves being the steward of a lot of historic places. I mean, I think pretty much every park or facility that I've visited in this city has some sort of historic aspect to it. Are you a great lover of history? Did you fall in love with history through this job? What's the role that history plays with your day-to-day job here as director?
I will admit that I was not a big history buff before coming to Athens. And not just this job, but this town in general has brought to light to me the importance of history and the role that it plays. But even knowing that, I'd never made the connection with parks and recreation or leisure services in history. But when we get to spend time in places like the Morton or the Historic House Museum that we have there, or if you've never been on a walk in Beach Haven property, absolutely phenomenal, the history and the culturally rich resources that we have here in this community. I still, to this day, love to learn from staff. I will find myself in one of these facilities, and quite often, if staff happens to be there and someone's leading a tour, I'll eavesdrop because I love to pick up a new nugget of information that perhaps I did not know already. And staff is very resourceful in that regard. And so they're very patient to let me ask questions when I need to. So yeah, I've really embraced that history and have come to appreciate it. And what we do offer in this department is wonderful.
Well, the community appreciates you as well. We're about to tilt towards this moment, COVID questions here particularly. But I guess one last question about leisure services in general, which is there anything about doing this job that you think might surprise people, or is there anything that the average person walking around Athens, visiting our parks or Greenway, might not realize goes into the process of providing these services?
I think what may surprise people is everything that goes on behind the scenes. Um, Most people think that we're made up of the staff that they see on the grounds every day. Excuse me. While they play a very important role, what happens behind the scenes, people never see. It's the people who are inspecting those trails or those boardwalks or bridges, or inspecting that picnic shelter, repairing those things because they get such heavy use, keeping them clean. And right now, that's more important than it's ever been before, is making sure that you come to an environment that is both safe and clean and you feel comfortable. That takes a great deal of work, and we've got a fantastic maintenance staff. We've got men who possess skills that it's like maybe masters have done, but they're great. They're really good at everything, and they can do plumbing on the spot, or they can fix some electrical work. They have to do repairs to our swimming pools and splash pads, but they work tirelessly and long hours in evenings and weekends to make these facilities available to the public. And I think that's what people would be surprised about, how much it takes behind the scenes to make that happen.
Absolutely. So, this moment now. So, when did this start affecting your work? Walk us through the chronology of how the COVID-19 situation unfolded for the Leisure Services Department.
Well, like everyone, we were caught completely by surprise that week, I think, of March 9th, we started hearing more and more conversation. It became more than conversation about we may be having to adjust our operations. And that weekend of the 14th and 15th of March, I know a lot of directors around the government, along with our manager's office and elected officials, spent a lot of time on emails, phone calls, text messages, making decisions and trying going forward, how is this impacting us? And I'm really proud of our local government and our agency, and that we stepped up earlier than most places in this state to shut down our operations on March 16th. And I remember going to the office that day and meeting with our leadership team to talk about this impact. And of course, none of us had any idea that 2 months later we would still be sitting here.
Right.
But we were talking about what this impact could be. Let's ride out the storm. Like many people, we thought, let's take a few weeks. Staff can telework. We can send them some things to be doing at home. We need to make sure that we continue to feed animals. One of the first things that comes to your mind, if there's a ice storm, a snowstorm, we do a lot of animal care, both at the Nature Center and at Bear Hollow Wildlife Zoo.
Right.
So it never stops. And we've had staff that walk for miles in thick snow in years past just to be able to get to that zoo when they couldn't drive and make sure those animals were fed. So you instantly start putting those emergency services into place, thinking that, we'll be back in a few weeks.
Right.
So obviously we were all astounded by, wow, this is really happening. And you hear about it, but until it hits, you just don't imagine it's really going to affect you this way. So as time went on, we began talking about, okay, there's a little bit of a new normal here, and what's that going to look like for us? And I want to commend our programming staff, from gymnastics to our dance center, to our zoo folks, our nature center people, our athletic folks, community centers. They all started putting together virtual programming within days of us being shut down so that they could continue to reach out and connect with the community. And that programming has become extremely popular now. We have a page on the Leisure Services website that you can click on and see the latest virtual programming that's happening, or perhaps it's a tour of the zoo. This Saturday was scheduled to be our annual Snake Day, which is a huge event at Sandy Creek Nature Center. They are doing Snake Day events every day this week leading up to that. And then they're doing a virtual Snake Day this coming Saturday. So I've been really excited and pleased to see everything that we've been doing over the past 2 months to stay connected and to provide parents and children something to relate to at home.
Yeah. What has been the most challenging navigating COVID-19 through your department? What's been the toughest part?
Well, it's making decisions on what should remain open, what needs to be closed, and how do we reopen things in a safe manner, in a healthy manner, so that we can lessen any spread of this again. From the beginning, we realized that we play, especially in this time, a very important role, because after a certain amount of time, people have got to get out of their houses. They're getting a little stir crazy. Homeschooling's beginning to drive people a little bit up the wall. My grandchildren moved here with my daughter and her husband just before the pandemic hit and have lived with us. So I've been watching homeschooling going on, and I know just my own grandchildren and my daughter and her husband looking for somewhere to be able to get outside a little bit.
Right.
So from the beginning, we kept the Firefly and Greenway trails open, because what that allowed us to do is to give people a recreational outlet, but yet they could still continue to move and not stop and gather. On a 12 to 14 foot wide trail, you could still social distance as you walk or jog or ride your bike. So those trails have stayed open from the beginning. And what we've been developing as a leadership team is a plan to begin phasing in some reopening of some of our parks that can be done so recognizing all the health concerns that it still exist, and do so in a safe and healthy manner. So that plan will begin being executed very soon.
I want to go ahead and share something here on screen. So Lindsay Brannon just shared, my daughter Claire is so sad she's missing Snake Day this year. Thank you for doing so many things virtually. Kent, I'll chime in along Lindsay here and say, last summer, as it was for my parents when I was a kid, leisure services became a big part of my family's life. My wife and my daughter, my wife's a school teacher, so she wasn't working over the summer. She, my in-laws, my mother-in-law, and when I had the odd day off myself, there were so many leisure service programs that for being a parent, you depend on, not just for variety, but for socialization, for different experiences. And, my wife, Laura, the other day commented how difficult this is going to be, because we have this summer stretching out ahead of us with a lot of uncertainty about, which of the things we signed up for really can happen. We were hoping to have her do a swim class with you guys, and to keep things safe, you're having to delay the start on that. I'm sure you're hearing a lot from parents. I think about the annual Sandy Creek Day Camp Lottery. That's such a big part of the annual Athens tradition. What does it feel like to be in May, to be poised right before your biggest season, and to have this much uncertainty? What's it like to deal with all that?
It's tough, Tommy. I think the most heartbreaking thing for all of us as a department was when we had to make the decision to cancel camps and delay the opening of pools during the month of June. Our camps, we offer camp opportunities for over 6,000 kids each summer. And we have camps ranging everything from gymnastics to, you mentioned Sandy Creek Day Camp earlier, to art camps, to theater camps, to sports camps and recreation camps, dance camps. We have a wide variety. And it's really one of the crown jewels of our department, as evidenced by the fact that these camps fill up so quickly every summer. And it was a really difficult decision, but we knew early on that we were going to have to make that hard decision and cancel at least the month of June so that parents have time to know that that's coming and they can be thinking about their alternate plans this summer.
Yeah.
We are still hanging on to those hopes that July and yes, the month of July for our pools and our camps will still happen. I'm very pleased to say that our staff stepped up and said, let's try to provide more camp opportunities during July than what we previously intended to. So we've added over 600 more camp positions or slots just so that we can try to give children as much as possible an abbreviated summer experience. So if all health indicators are on our side, the month of July is not only going to be back to normal, but possibly even exceed the norm by having our pools, splash pads, and multiple camp opportunities for people.
Kent, that's very exciting to hear about the summer. I want to talk about the moment we're in right now for a second. You know, I'm a runner. I like to go out and run in all the beautiful spaces we have in Athens. I know one of my favorite places to do time trials is Southeast Clark Park, because you have that wonderful loop there that's now closed. But as I'm out running, one of the things I'm noticing is there's such a tension between the fact that for people's sanity, I've never seen so many people out exercising in this town as we're having right now. People want to get outside and get into the outdoors. They're cooped up in their house. But also, this is a time where it's possibly the most dangerous time for people to interact. And I think that nowhere has that tension probably been better felt than in your department, where you've had to make decisions between we know people want to go out now more than ever before, but we have to be extremely careful about where we're, what kind of social experiences we're allowing to happen. Can you talk some about managing that tension in the spaces that you manage?
Well, it is creating a lot of tension, and I get a great deal of emails from citizens asking about, when can these tennis courts open, or pickleball players that are anxious to be able to get outside. And we completely understand and we share that sentiment that we want to be open, but we don't want to be part of a problem either. We have a role to support our mayor and commission, who are very wisely taking a cautious approach toward reopening the government, so that we can hopefully minimize any reoccurrence. And so we have put together a plan that is being discussed right now that will begin slowly opening a few more of our large outdoor areas that have trails, places like Sandy Creek Park, what used to be Trail Creek Park, which is now Virginia Walker Park, Memorial Park, Burton Park, some places that have trails that allow people to continue to exercise and get outdoors, but maintain some social distancing. There has been a lot of pressure on our Greenway and Firefly trails because they've been the only things that have been open in our department. So we're hoping very soon we'll open this next segment that will give other opportunities for people to get out and recreate and exercise. And then as we watch health indicators and things begin to improve, we're going to be gradually phasing in more of our operations soon.
Kent, I'm going to bring up important local figure and supporter of ours, Milton Leathers, well known around town. Milton's being a bit cheeky here, I think. I missed the beginning. Are my wife and I too old to be campers? Milton, I'd love to see you out there at camp. I do think you'd exceed maybe slightly the average age of camp. But in addition to celebrating Milton's famous sense of humor, I wanted to bring this up, Kent, to ask you, leisure services does serve parents, it does serve young people, but it also serves people of all ages, including some of the most vulnerable populations right now that might be susceptible to something like coronavirus. Have you had special discussions about protecting seniors at this time?
Well, currently, some of the facilities where our seniors come the most are remaining closed. Um, Part of our plan is as we do begin to reopen, um, are we going to limit some of that access gatherings to only a certain recommended size, a group size, so that we can be safe? But we certainly miss the seniors that come to our programming. We have a tremendous programming for the physically mentally challenged or disabled population. Brandon Bartlow is our programmer who has built that in the past 2 years to an incredible group of people who come on a very regular basis. We miss those populations as well. So we're trying to be sensitive in our plans for reopening so that we can get them back as quickly as we can. But we got to limit those group sizes until things become safer.
Kent, things to be safer, like you're describing. Do you have any recommendations or tips for people that might be out on the Greenway today or tomorrow, or folks that are enjoying the limited green space that they can get out into now? What would you recommend for those folks?
Well, in the little bit that I have gotten out in the community, I've noticed that a lot of people are so anxious to put this behind us that they're sometimes dropping their guard. And I truly recommend that as people, whether you're on a trail or you're coming to visit a park, to still be mindful about that social distancing. And if it's great to be able to stop and talk to people, but maintain that 6 foot range between the people that you come across on a trail or at a park, and know that as we begin to open, we're going to limit restroom access, and we will have someone that are going to be cleaning restrooms on a very regular basis and sanitizing those. Also, some things that lend itself to people gathering, like outdoor courts and be it basketball or tennis, people gather in groups. We're going to delay those openings a little bit longer. Playgrounds, for very obvious reasons, will be closed a little bit longer. We really want to encourage you to avoid gathering in groups of 10 or more at this time, and to really keep those social distance lines for the safety of everyone, because we don't want to come back to having to close this anytime again in the future. We want to open these parks and keep them open for the community.
Kent, has this effectively paused any kind of park improvement or SPLOST projects that you are currently working on? I know you mentioned the Trail Creek name change, but I know that you have a very exciting season ahead of you, very exciting decade ahead of you of park improvement projects. Are things effectively paused right now?
Well, actually, no. You would be surprised. Our own project management specialist is working with the SPLOST office, and while it might not be moving at the same speed, there's a lot of things that are still moving forward. We've got some capital projects at Dudley Park to make some improvements there, as well as on our Firefly Trail. There's construction still going on out in Winterville with that segment of trail, and we'll soon be going out to bid for that segment that picks up right around the loop where the new racetrack is being built, where it currently dead ends, and we'll start heading out to Old Winterville Road.
Wow.
So we're still making things happen as we speak. So there was a pause there for a few weeks because nobody was quite sure, is this going to last or not? But once we realized that this is teleworking has kind of become a new norm, we dug our heels in. We started getting back to work on those projects.
Absolutely. Ken, be one program where we like to acknowledge our sponsors. So I'm just going to bring this up on screen for us. First of all, this week's programming is brought to you by First American Bank and Trust, great local bank. I know that for organizations like ours that depended on a PPP loan to keep the lights on, we really appreciate Jeff Bishop and everybody, Julie Denton, everybody over at First American, and Susan that helped us get the loan through. So thank you to First American, and thank you for also sponsoring this week's programming. The people you see on screen here, these are our annual sponsors. They help us throughout the year maintain our mission of celebrating and conserving our community heritage here in Athens. If you'd like to become a sponsor, if you believe that this is something that you support, please visit historicathens.com. I'll also mention that we're a 52-year-old nonprofit, 501c3. We do depend on individual donations and donor members. If you'd like to become a donor member, you can visit historicathens.com. Memberships begin at only $5 a month, and it really does support an organization that works to help our community navigate the future by understanding the past. So please consider visiting that. And thank you to everybody you see on screen. I'll mention that we have published on our Facebook page the full list of interviews that we have coming up. So feel free to take a look at that image. It's zoomable on our Facebook page. When you have 55 interviews, the font gets pretty small. So feel free to go ahead and check that out. We're so excited about Kent's interview today, the 21 interviews before that, and the interviews that are going to be coming every weekday at 1 o'clock until June 26th. So that we hope that you'll check that out. And then one last note, and then we're going to get back to Kent, is our staff over at the Athens Welcome Center. The Athens Welcome Center, also known as the Church Waddle Brumby House, the oldest residence in Athens, Georgia. They have been hard at work trying to decide how to welcome our online viewers. And so they have begun a series of virtual tours and workshops each weekday at 2 o'clock. So immediately after this broadcast ends, you can head over to the Facebook page for the Athens Welcome Center and see some of the programming they've been offering. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, Interim Director Michelle Wynn is going to be doing tours on-site live from some of the National Register of Historic Places sites throughout Athens. Yesterday was the Church Waddle Brumby House. Wednesday will be the Wilkins House, and Fridays the Bishop House. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, Caitlin Short, staff member from the Welcome Center, is going to be offering virtual workshops. Today is going to be on antique furnishings. So you can check that out at 2 o'clock at the Facebook page for the Athens Welcome Center. And so we hope that you will check that out. We're once again thankful to First American Bank and Trust. And now we're going to go ahead and get back to Kent. So Kent, thank you for allowing me the chance to thank everyone and share the spiel. I know it takes many hands to make light the work, for sure. So Kent, I want to kind of jump into the last quarter of this program by going through some of the same questions we ask each of our guests. The first one is this. So we know that many businesses are open for curbside, and so some of our favorite places are places we can still enjoy. But as I'm sure I don't have to tell you, some of the best places in Athens right now are closed or not available to the public. If tomorrow you woke up and somehow magically this was all over, what would be some of the first stops you'd make? Where do you miss going?
Well, you're going to find this rather ironic, but when my grandchildren moved here, the one thing they're excited about, they think their papa's got the greatest job in the world because there's all these parks and a zoo and arts facilities and a nature center. And they could not wait to get out to each of those locations. And I promised them, well, we're going to go, but the weather's not good. If you recall, we were having a lot of rain before the pandemic hit. And so then just as the weather cleared, the pandemic hits. So this 6 and 8 year old in my house have not had that chance to get to the nature center yet, have not been to the zoo. They love to get out in our parks. They like to go for a bike ride on the trail. They're anxious for me to take them to Papa's Parks. So one of the first places we'll be going is to our very own department facilities as soon as the opportunity exists. And I'm like many people, I miss some great restaurants in Athens. So you'll probably see me at either Last Resort or Chuck's Fish House real soon.
Absolutely, both very good choices. So, all right, I want to go back to a historic aspect of this conversation. So, Kent, what we've been sharing with each of our guests is the following. Part of our mission is historic preservation. It's a component of what we do. And one of the conversations going on in historic preservation right now has been some level of concern. It's likely we're going to come out of a recession. It's likely we'll come out of this pandemic, and at times like that, sometimes people are very eager to do not only good development, but sometimes reckless development that can endanger historic places. And so, what we've been asking each of our guests is, what are some of the historic places you love that you hope 50, 60 years from now, if somebody's watching this video, they can get up from their computer, whatever device they're using at the time, and head out to that historic place that you hopefully still exists. So what are some places you hope that this community preserves?
Well, we've already talked a little bit about the Morton Theater and my love for that facility, and yes, I may be biased, but let me tell you, it's a phenomenal resource that we have in this community, and I hope it's here for many generations to come. One thing, Tommy, that I know you're familiar with, and I'm very excited about, is that this community, through their SPLOST vote, the SPLOST 2020 vote, approved funding to eventually restore and open up the Beach Haven property along Atlanta Highway. Um, if you ever get an opportunity to go on a tour that's led by someone on that property, you will absolutely be blown away at the cultural and natural resources that exist on there. And it's right here in our own city limits that people have no idea what's there. The old home on that site, the rock features that were built many, many, many uh, decades ago by the people, the family that lived there. An absolutely beautiful site that I'm looking forward to us preserving and protecting and opening it up as a park in the future. And many generations down the road will be able to come and enjoy that beautiful piece of property.
Absolutely. Yeah. Can't wait for that to
I,
open. Uh,
I,
I hope that, certainly hope that 56 years from now, folks are still celebrating that site and all it has to offer. Um, Ken, this is a very open-ended question, and I think it'll take us through the end of the hour here, or at least the conversation that comes from it. 100 years from now, if somebody's looking back at this, what would you want them to know about what Athens was like during this moment?
wow. Well, let me say this. I will readily admit to anybody, I think this community was caught off guard.
Mm,
But then again, I think this whole country was caught off guard. But what's been amazing is the way that Athens has stepped up during this time. Um, I referenced earlier that our elected officials, their leadership early on that closed down our community allowed us to have fewer than average cases of COVID-19 locally, and their leadership throughout this process, but not just the local government, but this community through the nonprofit agencies, through our local churches who have stepped up to help feed people and clothe people. It's been amazing to watch the response of people that are stepping up to care for each other and for those especially in need during this challenging time. I mentioned earlier that we've got great resources on our staff, and some of our staff have stepped up during this crisis. The Linden House, for instance, turned into a mask making operation. And
mm,
some of our staff, as well as staff in other departments in the government, began coming to the Linden House, social distancing themselves, and we set up mask making stations to make employees throughout the government as they come back to work. They'll all get 2 masks each for not only their protection, for the public protection as well. Then we had employees throughout the government that took kits home and began making masks at home
mm,
to also help step up to meet this crisis. Um, some of our staff is working on an AmeriCorps or an Athens Corps project that will start focusing on giving community projects that will be paid opportunities for them, not just during this pandemic, but to extend beyond. But things that are projects like gardening or cleaning up or protecting some of our resources that are in this community, and they'll go through our own Athens Community Corps program that is currently being put together and discussed by our elected officials. So we're stepping up in as many ways as possible. So many people in this community to respond to this challenge. Nobody seems to be afraid of it. They've got a healthy respect of it, but they're willing to meet it head on and do what we need to do for this community to continue to be the special place that it is.
Kent, you talk about it being a special place. One thing I just kind of wanted to throw out at you to see what your theory might be. You've lived in this community for quite some time. You've gotten to know it and its unique character pretty well. A couple weeks ago, we were asked to contribute a segment to WUGA on how Athens had navigated the 1918 flu. And through the process of researching that, we came to realize that just as you described Athens being caught off guard this time, but then responding quickly, that had happened in 1918 in a way that oddly mirrors what we're going through, where they were more restrictive and more careful than surrounding counties. The end result was a better prognosis for its citizens in terms of infection and mortality rate. I'm just wondering, since you know Athens so well, what do you think explains the fact that we've handled both of these crises in the same way?
Well, I think it's putting citizens in their health and well-being first, and I think that that's been evident so many ways in this community. And I think stepping up to that challenge, it's not an easy thing to do. It's trying to identify where those needs are can sometimes be part of the biggest challenge. And the needs sometimes are in places that you don't even expect. For instance, we've got a lot of artists in this community. We're a very culturally rich, art-rich community, but a lot of artists who are unable to do their work and to practice their craft. And our own elected officials have made it a priority to find some funding to set up art grants that are going to begin helping local artists here soon. Who would think of that ordinarily, except a community who's trying their best to turn over every possible leaf and rock and find where the needs are and how can we potentially respond to them. There's a great response reaching out to the homeless. Is how are we making sure that they're fed and clothed and taken care of during this time. We put hand washing stations out at key locations to help people in the community, especially the homeless, keep wash and help us cut down on spreading some of this. So it's recognizing those needs, but not just recognizing, but stepping up to try to meet those. I think is what happened back previously with that flu pandemic and what's happening today in our community.
Ken, last question here, I think. When we're speaking to community leaders like yourself, one theme that pops up a lot has been the innovation necessary to continue managing a department at a time like this, or an organization at a time like this. One theme we're hearing a lot about is that through this process, and through, as they say, necessity being the mother of all invention, some organizations have adopted new procedures that that some are considering keeping when this is over. Have you noticed any kind of innovation like that throughout your department? New ways to do things that you think will make it easier to function in the future?
Well, it's ironic you mentioned that. Just the other day, our leadership team was in one of our mini WebEx meetings, and at first it was somewhat uncomfortable, but we've been in so many of these meetings now that we said, is there really a reason why we have to all get in cars and drive to one site to have a meeting like this down the road? And maybe not. Maybe we could begin having more of these kind of meetings. And I'm hearing that from a lot of other people as well. The time that you can save um, can really be resourceful and helpful to each of us. By sometimes you need to be there face to face, but not always. So I see us having more of these WebEx or Zoom meetings as we go forward. Um, but I also see the how well teleworking can happen in some cases. Um, when you've got employees that there may be health concerns or they may be taking care of an elderly parent, and while it might not be on a full-time basis, there may be certain days in their schedule that it's important for them to have to be there for that elderly parent or for a sick child. But teleworking can really work. And so I think we have demonstrated that in this community. I know we have in the local government. Um, to be honest, I think I've been so much more productive teleworking in these past 2 months, just because you don't have the same level of interruptions that you may have in an office setting. And you're also restricted by not being able to get out and go to the places that you normally go to. And you're saving time by having meetings that don't require travel. So I think teleworking and having the virtual meetings, I would like to see us keep some level of virtual programming and stay in connection with the community that cannot always leave home. But how can we reach out to people in the future to continue connecting by programming at home that way? So there's been a lot of lessons learned that I think are going to make us all better in the long run.
Absolutely. Well, Kent, I can't wait to see you back out in our parks. I know that uh, we've missed everything from the Bears' birthday to the programming we talked about this summer, but we know that I guess I just want to say on behalf of Historic Athens, we really appreciate everyone in your department and the work they're doing to not only open back up, but to open up safely and to keep local citizens first. So thank you for that, and thanks for taking the time to do this interview today.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and we're blessed, like I said, to be able to serve this community. So thank you for your support.
Absolutely. And Ken, I guess before you go, if anyone's trying to keep abreast of openings or changes with leisure services, where would you recommend they go? Is there a newsletter or a Facebook page? How should they keep track of what's going on?
They can go to acc.gov/leisure, and we will be keeping those openings. The virtual programming is there, and we'll also keep people posted on openings as things change.
Okay, great. All right, I'm going to bring that link up on screen, and then it'll be available in the comments section below. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. We will be back tomorrow at 1 o'clock with another edition of This Moment in History, COVID-19 in Athens, Georgia. Also, as I mentioned, if you have the opportunity, go ahead and when this concludes, head over to the Athens Welcome Center Facebook page for their workshop on antique furnishings. It should be really interesting. So there's your link. Kent, thank you so much. You and I are going to go off air. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. We hope to see you back tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.